One of the fascinating things for me as I watch the electric tube, the television, is the commercial that talks about looking into our DNA and finding out what we're made out of. You know, they've complicated that because, boys were always made out of snits and snails and puppy dog tails, and little girls, they're made out of down. But they're made of down because God created them that way so they'd like boys. But we had that curiosity about who we are. And probably some of you, maybe many of you, I don't know, I've never done it, but I know some of my priest buddies have done this, have sought out their origins through their DNA. It's kind of a fun thing to do for many, and who are we? In my childhood, it was important that my parents would tell the stories of who we are. How did my grandpa get to Bloomfield, Kentucky? His origins were in Massachusetts, in Salem, Massachusetts. We don't know how he got to Salem, Massachusetts, but from there he had a journey. And they told us about that journey to Canada, and he married a French woman in Canada, and then he came to the United States, and ultimately came to Louisville, and then to Bloomfield. And there was a rationale for all that movement. And my mother's family, they got the name of the boat that they came over from Ireland on, the Ark and the Dove. And possibly some of your Irish relatives were on that same boat, landing in the United States from Ireland. Those stories were etched into our memory and told to us over and over and over again. And also, as they were being told over and over again, they were embellished to make them look better, so that the oral tradition is not exact. It has its own flaws, but nevertheless, the importance of who we are. This morning we read from the book of Maccabees, the last book of the Bible, but in the book of Maccabees, the mother had instilled into those children who they are in relationship to their people, to their Hebrew origins, to their origins in Egypt, and so on, and to Moses, and the whole story that is etched in forever into their minds and to their hearts. And from that story, Jesus is born. So this time of year, when we're interested not just in our DNA and our human origins, but in the story of where we came from, story of creation, and particularly the story of where we came from as God's people. So important. St. Paul, as he made his travels to identify Jesus to the community outside of Israel and to the rest of the world, it was important to him to identify that this Jesus was the Son of God. And telling those stories and telling how he came to believe this and so on was so important in his teaching and his preaching and in the beginnings of the church. Who are we in relation to God? We tell those stories over and over again. But then, mixed into that stew of who we are, is our efforts, the human element that comes in. It's nice to tell the stories, but the stories become embellished with our own personalities, with our own temperament, and with our own fears and anxieties and our own doubts and all those kinds of things that kind of mess up and sometimes sour the stew as we think about who we are in our lives. And so we keep coming back to those stories and trying to re-relate to them so that we can remember, and how important it is for us to remember, especially as we experience the completion of life of our own family, our own relatives, our grandparents and our parents and our brothers and sisters and so on. And so we spend the month of November, remembering them. And remembering them not as the Sadducees might do, as saying, well, they're just gone in the wind, but remembering them as God's people, remembering them in terms of the teachings of not just of the Old Testament and the Maccabees and of St. Paul in the New Testament and of Jesus, but remembering them in terms of that resurrection, the fullness of life, that our joy comes when our life is fulfilled. You know, in a sense, we say we're trying to get home. And we're born into this world, but then we find out that every place we look to as home, we outgrow it, and then we wonder, well, where's home going to be next? And so we establish to families and to life and so on, through these children that are here today, that journey of life. And in that journey, someone needs to keep telling us who we are, not just in our genealogy, but who we are in our spiritual genealogy in relation to the God who has created us. It's the reason why we read these scriptures every Sunday, every year, after year after year after year, retelling the story that somehow or another, the hope is that it will catch on to us and become part of our living reality. Not just a remembered origin that we've embellished, but a present understanding of that journey of life. And so today, when we come along to hear the stories and the difficulties that they had in Jesus' time between those who believed and those who did not believe, and how those who did not believe wanted to justify themselves by tricking up Jesus, trying to make him think like they thought, we find that same thing going on in our life today. There's a trickery going on right now. It's not just the television telling us to check out our genealogy. It's a fun thing to do, but television telling us that it's time to start getting ready for Christmas. There's a falsehood built into that because it tells us to deny all of the things that Christmas is about, except for business, except as a time of marketing and time of selling stuff that we either do or don't need. But in the midst of this, we come back to our origins and remember, the final and the ultimate relationship of life is not with Black Tuesdays or Black Wednesdays or Black Fridays, but with our coming to the Lord. So today, what do? We come to listen to his word, try to remember who we are, and come to the altar, share the Eucharist, and carry with us that Lord who walks with us and guides us and gives us a determination and a surety that our home is at the end of the journey, and while we're here, we're tent dwellers en route. So we thank God for the gift of his presence through his word, his presence through sacrament, and his presence to us as we tell the stories to one another over and over. So never fail, parents, grandparents, to keep telling your stories as who you are, not just in relationship to genealogy, but particularly in relationship to God and in relationship to that journey of life that leads us to God.